Are you feeling the same way I'm feeling right now? Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the finale of The Penguin, and I can't. I know I'm jumping into it right away, but what we heard was true. As this episode came to a close, it was so dark. And what Colin Farrell said with regards to, I think he said something like hating Oz by the end of the series, I now think, for the first time, despite seeing other things he's done this season, despite us knowing he's a bit of a scumbag, this time, I really felt what Colin Farrell meant. So prepare yourselves, as this is going to be quite a long recap, review, and breakdown for the Penguin finale. They're usually 34, 35 minutes, but I wouldn't be surprised if with other things that I want to go over, as is, I think, a few hints for where Oz's storyline can be taken in the future of the Batverse, which I'm dying to get into among some other little nuggets of information. But let's just get into this. Let's just do it. So at the beginning here, we pick up with some more flashbacks, giving us a whole bunch of new context with Francis. And I really liked the way that they handled these flashbacks, since Francis was in a session with Julian, being cast back into her memories. And it was a nice execution to keep Deirdre O'Connell as Francis, despite, these flashbacks to many, many years ago. I also love I think you guys were saying it's EDMR, red light therapy, and the way they showed that on screen, because, there's all of these theories about Julian Rush, and even though we didn't get any firm confirmations as to the potential larger plan they have behind this character, if at all, you can, just to entertain it, for those who love talking about this, you can imagine a grounded Mad Hatter in Matt Reeves' Batverse would be, executed and used in a way like this, such as when you see Francis start to break through the memory bubble, I'll just call it, and you can see Julian and Sophia in the background, taking her back into the memory, and you just keep having that red light just waving and reverberating over the screen, that very Batman screen test red light. And I pictured in that moment Batman and other Gotham citizens in a situation like this with the Mad Hatter or whatever. But would we ever see something like that? I don't know, but I just wanted to kind of give you some food for thought. And the key things that we learn out of this scene when Rex Calabrese goes to visit her is that she knew that Oz trapped his brothers in the overflow tunnel this entire time. This is just so heartbreaking, really, on so many levels, because I personally can only really attempt to and begin to imagine how Francis is feeling. You've had this kid, as she describes, who's always been a bit different, overly needy, but you were dealing with that, you accepted, and now knowing he killed your other two sons, and you have to live with this other child of yours and pretend to be a nurturing, loving parent as though he never did that. Which is, of course, what leads to Rex Calabrese's suggestions, and he said, you can either take a kid like that to serve a greater purpose and give them the opportunity to maybe, do something great due to having their loyalty. Or, she can let him go, with basically Rex taking Oz out. And we see that she had indeed decided to do that. And we can tell in that final moment, Oz was promising her all of these things, saying how he sees her in ways that other people don't, and how ultimately he would just do anything for her, and he's gonna prove it to her, but just don't give up on me. And the weird thing about it is that you can almost look at it as if it was this sales pitch, trying to save his own life, even though he didn't realize it and had no idea. But what he said here gets her to change her mind and go with option one, and that is the thing that leads to that scene we saw at the end of last episode, and where you can see that younger Francis just defeated, accepting that she's going to keep him around despite her hatred for her own son, pouring and just leaving and hinging everything onto Oz to give her a great life. Of course, I do think it is a bit more nuanced than that. Despite hating her own son, you know, Oz is still her own son. So having the conviction to go through with that decision would be hard, obviously, for a parent to do anyway. So that obviously would play into this. And by the way, I forgot to give a shout out, but the kid, excuse me, I forget the name, who played and portrayed the young Oz was just incredible as well.
And jewelry? Nice shit too.
And I swear, is it just me, or was that title card intro theme so much more darker and sinister? So this is when we finally pick back up with Vic after having gone missing most of last episode, and we can't forget how Oz asked him to find the other gangs. He's rallied them all together to go to Crown Point, but obviously it's a bit too late. Everything has already exploded, and the other gangs just kind of, you know, write off their commitment that they made to Oz since the Bliss product has been taken off the table. And also, props to Vic for trying to speak some sense into them. It's just really sweet at the same time. Plus, it's just what makes the ending hurt so much more. We then pick up with Oz, who has awoken at Monrose, the very, very same place that he danced with his mother back in the day. So what better way is there, to be honest, for Oz to feel pain than to see what we see next? So Sophia reveals that she knows about what happened to Oz's brothers, which she of course learned through the sessions with Julian and, you know, those flashbacks we saw earlier. And in the face of being confronted with this in front of Francis, Oz, in his very, very, very slimy ways, completely denies it. I mean, of course he would. But Sophia doesn't give up there. She digs and digs and digs deeper, and then reveals another truth. In this moment, Sophia says that Francis asked Rex to kill her son with their last night together intended to be at Monrose. And you can just see that Oz, for once, in this moment, is kind of shut up for a second, quite interested to hear this despite the panic he's in. So this is where things step up a notch even more, as what Sophia is trying to do doesn't really seem to be working. And so she gets Oz's cigar cutter that she got from his apartment when her and Maroney raided it, and gives it to Julian, and she threatens to cut off the same finger that Oz told Vic to cut off Alberto. Even in the face of Francis's finger being cut off, about to literally be, well, it's even being sliced into in this moment, he still cannot allow himself to admit what he's done. And I love the way they showed this in the actors as well. Like, you see Sophia's face, this disgust just wash over her, this disbelief, with her saying, "What is wrong with you?" We had Francis screaming at Oz, shouting across from the room saying that it's my effing finger, you spineless prick. And that is so true, isn't it? The way that Oz was handling this situation, being hesitant and denying this, that, and the other, it's as if he was trying to, like, save his own finger, not like somebody else's, and that of his mother's. And I think all of this, you know, is just coaxing Francis to kind of shed this skin and the mask that she's worn for the past, 30 years since Oz has grown up to be in his, at least 40s now. And she just, can't disguise the hatred anymore. And so she reveals to Oz that she already knows. And for him just to tell her, like, I already know, you may as well say it. Even in the face of this, he says that it's her disease talking. And Sophia, in this moment, gets exactly what she wants. Francis just lets rip here. Deirdre O'Connell was just incredible. Like, everyone did such an incredible job. And she says that she hates him.
I wake up every goddamn day sick that I'm your mother.
And she gets up, calls him a disappointment, a waste of space, and then boom, she smashes a bottle and basically stabs him with it.
You're the devil. You're the goddamn devil.
It's just also twisted and tragic, especially when they pair it in with the younger Oz appearing in that moment when she stabbed him. And then we have Francis see Jack and Benny across the room just dripping in that rainwater. And with all of this going on, she has a stroke and collapses. Now, I have to admit here, don't hate me for this, you know, this is a review as well as a recap and a breakdown. Oz getting out of his restraints was, I think, a bit convenient for me. You know, Sophia Gigante had one job, And that's to make sure she gets what she wants. And he was taped with like masking tape, like round and round and round. And sure, I get it. He's a big, strong ball of a boy, as Francis used to say. But when your whole plot after this moment, which, you know, leads to Oz becoming the kingpin of Gotham City, is predicated off of him getting out of Monrose at this moment, then the way he gets out of that situation is obviously, you know, very important in how you handle it. This is when Oz carries Francis out into the car, but not before shooting that detective who was doing drops right through the eye. And I'm also surprised that he didn't hear bloody gunfire just feet away and, you know, go in there to back Sophia up, but I guess that's not his problem anymore. And Oz drives Francis right to the hospital, and I'm sorry again, I don't think this is a nitpick. I do have a bit of an issue with this one as well, because it's like, I'm just assuming the keys were just left in the car. I mean, we didn't see him go over to the detective's body, and I say this particular pick is quite a bit of an issue because Sophia was just seconds behind him in that moment as he just began driving away and even shot at him. So do you see what I mean? For everything to happen in the future, for Oz to survive, to become the man he's going to be in the future of this canon and this universe, it all hinges on this moment, and he just gets in the car and drives away. There's like, how did he know that was good? And if it didn't work out in that moment, the key wasn't in there, then he would have died. Sophia was already basically there, but he like hit the gas and then drove away. So I just feel like this could have been handled a teeny bit differently. Oz drops Francis off at the hospital, and he's obviously worried sick about her. He steals a phone and calls Vic to come to him as he patches himself up. Now, lucky for him, Francis shanking him with that broken bottle didn't really seem to cut too deep. Now, as for Sophia, it turns out all of the gangs of Gotham have been summoned to the Falcone estate, and she reveals that she's ready to give up all of her control, all of her territories, for the person who brings her Oz first, as, you know, she's leaving Gotham. But I have to get back to Oz, because this is when I would say, personally for me, a huge part of the episode happens. So this is when Oz heads into City Hall, and he notices Bella Real's plaque there, which is when Councilman Haiti makes a reappearance, and is like, dude, what the hell are you doing here? If I get seen with you, this this won't look good. Oz sells him a story about everything that's happened so far in the gang war, pitting it mostly on, well, everything on Sophia Gigante and Salvatore Maroni. And as a result of this, Councilman Haiti can present all of this to the people of Gotham who are dying for answers and just turn out to be the hero. And to jump to it here, Haiti asks Oz what he would want in return. Even going on to say, hell, maybe one of these days we'll bump into Bella Real, which is when Haiti is seriously considering this, but he heavily stresses to Oz that he needs to take a few things into account. But what I found, I would say, like, profoundly fascinating is that Haiti doesn't dismiss it, meaning that he thinks that maybe this can be pulled off and he can actually officially introduce Oz into this political scene. And more on that in just a minute. So he also warns Oz that Bella Real is forming a commission, anti-corruption, and they're going after cops, city officials, and they even have a list of Carmine's associates. So if Oz wants to be welcomed into the city official, you know, political scene,
you gotta look clean.
And Haiti does probably mean that both loose ends wise, so like wrap up any ties you have, like any dodgy things, so maybe the 44 below, like make sure anyone who can rat on you is dead, or like just clean up your image there so nothing can come back to bite you if people look into it officially, that is, and legally. But also physically, especially with the up and down look he gives Oz there, which is probably one of the reasons why we see Oz at the end of the episode dressed up with the top hat influence and inspiration. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't always going to look like that once he became king of Gotham, but he needed to kind of clean up and look the part as well. Man, there are so many things I can talk about here, but first and foremost, I'm really excited to see what Bella Real is forming here with her commission. I think this will absolutely bleed into the Batman Part 2. And I think my former theory of, again, this might not happen, but maybe Batman dropping in on her office and helping her out, that may come true, even if she's reluctant at first. But, you know, Bella Real has had first-hand experience with knowing that this vigilante is here to help. And I think also on the Bruce Wayne side, he could be brought into the fold with this commission. Even though he's not a city official, he could at least lend his financial support with how she viewed that he could be doing more for this city. And as for other people who are part of this anti-corruption commission, well, we're just gonna have to wait to see. But it wouldn't surprise me if Harvey Dent is appointed as the new clean DA. I just loved hearing about all of this because it's one ball, in my opinion, that is already gaining momentum and rolling for the Batman Part 2. But back to what this means for Oz. I mean, whoa, like, now I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but as I said, I think this nods at, or at least, you know, alludes or offers a slight hint at the comic book storyline that influences Oz's new ambitions that are related to City Hall. I mean, think about it, guys. He is at City Hall. He's covering all of his bases at this moment so he can transition into being the kingpin of Gotham very smoothly, clean as a whistle, legally speaking, as he says. And he also mentions that it would be good to feel welcome in a place like this for a change and meet some of Hades' friends, implying that not only does this man's ambition stretch to being the kingpin of the whole of Gotham's criminal underbelly, but also to be in a position of being legally embedded into it, somewhat influenced what I feel is from maybe the Mayor of Gotham City storyline that we have seen explored in the Earth 1 comics, among other depictions. If I remember correctly, Fox's Gotham tried to do something with that. Now, this isn't me saying, by the way, before anyone thinks it, that Oz is literally going to become mayor anytime soon. I mean, for crying out loud, Bella Real has only just been elected. But I feel like they are most certainly setting up his ambitions to go that high. I mean, even as he's walking out of City Hall in this moment, and he spots Bella Real up the staircase, and the score that's playing in the background, kind of like this looming villainous kind of rise, tease of a score, and just the way he looks at her, he's looking at her as if he's got major plans. Now, of course, at the same time here as well, I need to say that this scene could just signify that Oz has big plans to flip Bella Real. Not that she's going to, but, you know, maybe perhaps have something on her one day so he can be legally embedded into Gotham and get what he wants from time to time. Plus, also, to be welcome in a place like this in general, to get his, as he puts it, connects with the higher-up officials of Gotham can always come in very handy as well. No, it doesn't guarantee he's going to be mayor, but either way, being legally embedded into being one of these city officials, in which he bitched about to the other gangs of Gotham in his speech the other episode, he's now going to be one of those guys, which is just insane. Because no matter what way you look at it, this man's ambition never ends. Because you know Batman is going to be looking at him after the Penguin series and thinking, how the living hell did this man get to be where he is at now? In bed, well, not only as a kingpin, but in bed with city officials. He needs to be stopped because he is a cancer that is growing in the city, right as Bella Real at the end of the Batman movie said that she was going to restore people's faith in the institutions of Gotham. But this couldn't look more corrupt if they tried. As Oz heads outside, he notices that Vic isn't in the car, and that's because we saw earlier that Vic gets a call from Link asking where Oz is at. And the way the episode frames it is such that Vic fell maybe for Link's eye, supporting Oz, and that they've now really just come to collect on his bounty. So this is when Sophia gets informed by Zhao that they have Oz, and she is very happy, and we get to see her burn the Falcone estate to Where Did You Sleep Last Night, which is a great track, but I'm not trying to be a party pooper here, because this was such an awesome cathartic moment, symbolizing a lot for Sophia's character, ready to leave everything behind. But given, and as a huge Nirvana fan, and given that they had Nirvana's Something in the Way in the Batman, Can you even begin to imagine, and you guys know if you know, hearing the Nirvana MTV Unplugged version of Where Did You Sleep Last Night over this scene? And the more I was seeing and hearing this scene, I was like, man, why didn't they do it? It would have tied so nicely back into the Batman. And look, I'm not saying there was anything wrong particularly with this version of the song, but I don't know. I just think it would have hit harder as well with Kurt's vocals portraying so much more visceral, like grungy pain and emotion. Totally not biased at all as a Nirvana fan, but I would love to see somebody edit Nirvana's version over this scene. And so she gets to the airport where she has the plane at the ready and the triads are there with Oz and Vic. So it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, that Link Zai betrays his own boss and shoots Feng Zhao, the Dailo of the Triads, in the head, obviously to take the opportunity to run the Triads for himself, and Oz is effectively, as of this moment, the kingpin of Gotham. And with what we learn after this, with every gang of Gotham's deputy killing their own gang leader, it's basically like as I said earlier, every single gang's own version of Oz rising to the top. I get why they did this, because, as I say, the old guard were somewhat playing by the old rules, and their deputies or lieutenants or whatever you want to call them want to have a new rule, and one that doesn't involve them being overlooked. Now, I think one question I had here, it's a bit of a nitpick, I suppose. It's like, how do we know all the Triads were okay with Link doing this? Like, is he in for some kind of reckoning when he gets back to the HQ of the Triads? Will there be those who want to kill him for killing his own and betraying his own boss? I know some of you may say, well, Boba, that defeats the point. Perhaps all the gang members of each gang were down for these mutinies and wanted change. But I think I just struggle to believe that nobody in any of the gangs wouldn't have any issue with their longtime gang boss being betrayed by their second in command. I get that the Penguin show doesn't really have the time to get into this, but it just is something that I was wondering about, because, you know, that's every gang in Gotham having a mutiny. And I'm sure there was some love for one of the gang bosses in one of these gangs. But either way, Oz takes Sophia on a drive, and what's so sad about this conversation is that Oz is just ranting at her, saying that her and her kind wouldn't understand how these people feel. But I just keep going back, and what I've said in previous reviews, to her speech a few episodes back, in where she introduced the Gigante family and offered a whole new way of operating a crime family. One that will pay people what they're worth, not be disposable. So she understands way more than Oz gives her credit for. Not to mention how he talks about people smiling at those with boots on their neck, and how she wouldn't know what people will do to push that down. Sophia has had a whole different kind of boot on her neck for 10 plus years, something Oz couldn't even understand, or maybe couldn't even hack for himself. But at this point, Sophia is just resigned. She accepts her defeat, and she's driven out to the water by the bridge. And I love how she rubs in Oz's insecurity about his mother's love for him in this moment, asking if she's told him that she loves him yet, and even says to him, after he had the goal to just say that she's going to hell, and she's like,
I'll save you a seat.
And obviously the big sad part is she is really going to her own hell. And I called it, but she has got a fate worse than death. Something the Penguin is cruel enough to do, and that is to send her back to Arkham State Hospital. And that is just soul shattering for Sophia. Now, not to take us out the moment here, but I mean, I don't know how she didn't hear Oz like waddle away. You know, how he just managed to do a Batman disappearance as the GCPD and Bok arrived. But anyway, back to it. When you just zoom out and look at Sophia's story as a whole, you can't tell me for 1 second that you don't feel for her. I wouldn't believe it, to be honest. Like, Oz has solidified himself as the biggest piece of crap in this finale, and we haven't even got started yet. Now, again, don't get me wrong, you know, after what Sophia did through sending that bomb in to blow up the tunnels, which, as we see on the news, has caused multiple citizen casualties that are on the rise, which, you know, as a result, makes her a domestic terrorist. So Sophia hasn't, you know, she hasn't exactly been great for Gotham, But from these comparisons, or like a character empathetic standpoint, you know, geez, like for me, it's Sophia any day of the week. Now, to connect some of these scenes later with her back in Arkham, I was just wondering where the hell Julian went this episode, so it's nice to know that he got a job back at Arkham, because as we know, he quit previously, to highly likely just be there for her. So I'm sure, like, theories of this character's future will persist, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. You know, as I've always said, he doesn't have to be a Rogues Gallery villain. He can just be Julian. But who knows what the future has in store. But let's get on to the more interesting thing here. As Sophia was back in Arkham in her cell, she's almost like borderline catatonic as Julian arrives to deliver her mail. He tells her it's more of the same, rants, poems, even marriage proposals from Gotham crazies who are just infatuated with her. But then he says this one's different. And Sophia gets a letter from her half-sister, none other than Selina Kyle, bloody Catwoman. And this just made me so happy, not even really for just the cameo's sake, but just how touching this was for Sophia. Not to mention how we also got a glimpse of Selina's theme in the score as well, which I really appreciated. But for me, it was more that this scene had so much to say on so many levels. Sophia at this point effectively has no family left. She's lost her sibling, Alberto. He was taken from her. Her other family were incomprehensibly cruel to her and helped her get put away in Arkham. And we know what happened to them. She really has absolutely nothing. But then, after all this, despite whatever, like think about it, whatever Selina must have been hearing on the news about this Sophia Gigante, Selina still had the compassion to reach out to her sister. Now, of course, we don't quite know what Selina wrote to her in that letter, but I intuitively feel that it was words of no judgment. I mean, you can tell it's somewhat a positive letter because Sophia's face goes from catatonic to then getting quite happy and emotional. Like, you can hear her breathing. It just seems like quite a touching letter. And also, what better a foundation for a newly kindled sibling friendship than to get to know that your own half-sister, Selina, tried to murder your own father during the events of the Batman movie. I bet Sophia, I think that's honestly what she was reading towards the end there. Well, maybe she wouldn't incriminate herself, but I bet she would have loved that. And maybe there was a clue to something like that. Maybe me and you have more in common than what you think with our father. Some kind of line like that. I don't know. But I don't know what this could mean for the future, but I thought it was pretty awesome. And also, it's kind of cool to know, by the way, that this is present-day Arkham compared to what we've seen before in the Penguin show. So what I'm trying to say is, she's locked up in there with Joker and the Riddler, and she'll be seeing them in the mess hall for lunch. Up next, we see Oz at the hospital. He's gone to see Francis to celebrate, saying that he's finally done it, but he notices that she's completely unresponsive with her eyes open, and so he sends Vic to get a doctor, but the doctor says that she suffered a serious stroke, and as a result of that, she's in this kind of persistent vegetative state.
You say she's a fucking vegetable?
Now, Oz is in a complete outrage in this moment because, as I've kind of gone over even in my predictions, what must have been over 30 years since he made that promise, he has finally come through. Francis's son is now king, but she's not here to receive it.
Tell me you're proud of me, please! Come on, just once, just tell me you're proud of me.
You know, the truth of the matter is, even if she was conscious, after what was brought back up to the surface and how she admitted she hates him, would she have really cared by this point? I don't know about that, but obviously, though, Oz is somewhat, I mean, blatantly, blocking all of what she said out. Almost as if, it's kind of weird, almost as if none of it happened, and is pretending as if things were the way they were before she was kidnapped. Now, I have to admit, despite the absolute cesspool of a person that this man is, seeing Colin Farrell's performance in this moment, and just given the heartbeat of this show in some ways was Oz and the relationship with Francis, and how he has literally done everything in his life for her, I felt for him in this moment in a way, and I felt like that was completely okay, because well-written villains, especially in a character study of a show like this, can be multifaceted, and Oz most certainly is, even if he's mostly a piece of shit. And this is the one thing we did all see coming, but it is sad to see nonetheless. And the fact that Vic was there for him too, placing a hand on his shoulder, again, like, it pisses me off, because, you know, this brings us into the next scene. And guys, I don't even know where to begin. Vic did everything for this man. He believed in him. And for a brief moment, it looked like Vic made it out alive, and it felt believable for the briefest of moments, because it's like, hey, yeah, you know what? He's here at the end of the episode. They're chilling. And, you know, I can imagine him reprising his role, even if it's a small role in the future, as Oz's deputy or, like, right hand. I was like, okay. And it was just so sweet. I keep saying that word, but Vic is a sweet, kind-hearted, good-hearted person. When he thanked Oz for taking him in and how he's like family to him. But it was around this moment in the scene where I felt something was off, and it hit me, and I was like, no, he's not going to. And as I, like, said that out loud, it simultaneously started happening, and my mouth was just hanging. But not only that, I've had mouth jaw drop moments before, but I felt like a hole in my chest, and I, like, honestly, when I say this, haven't felt a feeling like that this whole season, and that feeling being literal resentment for Oz. And I still haven't recovered. You know, the facade of the charm of Oz Cobb and enjoying the hustle of this character that you reluctantly root for in this show was just gone in an instant. He's not a good guy, but we still rooted for him. The show kind of still made you love to see him hustle. And there's been so many shows on the broader context here of moments where we've watched villains doing terrible things. And I'm like, well, holy crap, that was bad, right? You know, but I didn't really feel this pure, outright, disgruntled bitterness. But here, not to mention, coupled with Sophia's fate, and then, oh god, Francis, which we're going to get into after this, but the way they played this scene, the exchange of feelings between one another, and just the way Renzi Felice was even acting as Vic, stuttering once again as he was calling Oz family.
You're family to me.
To then have the literal life snuffed out of him by Oz's bare hands. But this is the point. This is what a Batman villain is. There's layers to Oz. We've even felt empathy for him, but he's still the Penguin. And honestly, guys, I know some people are going to be pissed off by this, but I think sometimes, I'm not saying you, but some audiences misconstrue being annoyed at what happens in the story as, like, a bad episode, and that couldn't be further from the truth. That doesn't make writing bad or the story bad. So I say kudos to this series for making him an ugly monster. An absolute, as I say, gutter-level villain. And that's the way he's meant to be. Batman's rogues gallery, guys, aren't good people. They are murderers. They are psychopaths. They're narcissists. Like all of them have done, especially in the darkest of comics, the most dark things. And I think sometimes people forget that with the more whimsical, loony portrayals that we can sometimes see, it's easier to be detached, I think, from reality with the actions we sometimes see them do in those other mediums, even if they're doing something bad. It's just like, it's not like seeing it in a grounded world. So when it's shown in Matt Reeves' grounded universe like this, which is so viscerally cold, like outright cold and grounded in life, in where you see this person for the piece of shit that he is, it's just brilliant at the same time, as disgusting as it is. And again, the Penguin is this. He is. And I'm glad that they did it, in a way. But I'm not. But you get what I'm trying to say. But man, hearing Vic beg the way he did when his throat was being crushed, and also, like, I have this face etched into my brain. You know that face that Oz pulled after killing him? I mean, look at him. Like, look at this monster. Look at this filth. It's just, I don't know. I hope my rant there, I know I went around in circles, was cathartic for you, because you all must be feeling it right now. Because I'm recording this days in advance. So, like, I've been itching to see your takes here, so let them rip. And then to rub it in, by the way, he takes his wallet, takes his ID out, but also takes his money as well. Like, Jesus, every detail here reinforces the piece of shit that Oz is. Now, later on, guys, obviously, Oz arrives back, as we kind of went over earlier, all prim and proper in his top hat, likely after having returned from an event with city officials, with Councilman Haiti introducing him to various people. And he arrives at this building, and only some of the letters are lit up, but it's called La Couronne. La Couronne, which is French for the crown, which is obviously extremely fitting of a place to have a penthouse at for the newly crowned king of Gotham. Now, I love how gothic this building looks, by the way, especially with that, like, final shot, and how, even though it's a penthouse, it's just a bit run down on the exterior, and also on the inside, it looks like it needs a bit of work too, but Oz is obviously going to pimp it out the more that he's living there. And in this moment, we see something else just insidious, and that's how he has Frances looking out the window at Gotham City like he promised her. And by the way, that view of Gotham looks sick. It really did. I loved the nighttime shots here. But obviously, guys, what's so cruel about this is that Frances said to him that she didn't want to be living like this, like some vegetable. And in that very scene, she made Oz promise her that he wouldn't let her live like this if it came to it. And yet here Oz is, keeping her as a prisoner almost, literally trapped in a body in the house of the devil, as Frances would put it, right? And it also really made me wonder if, despite her stroke and dementia, like, maybe the doctors didn't have everything, like, super correct in their diagnosis or whatever, and their prognosis for things, because since Oz has had time to get this penthouse and his Rolls Royce, that this scene maybe takes place a little bit further into December, so it'd only be, like, by a week or two, and maybe she is actually a little bit aware. I mean, I'm not a medical person, and I'm sure a stroke repair, neurologically speaking, would take God knows how long, if at all, especially paired with Lewy body's dementia, but they very deliberately showed a tear rolling down her face. So that's why I'm just wondering, like, maybe she had, like, a major stroke, can't move, she's basically vegetative to a degree, but she might be aware. I don't know, but it's just so disturbing how Oz takes that tear to be like, oh, I know.
It's everything you wanted.
But I take it disturbingly as she's literally trapped here in a body she can't control, could be maybe mildly cognitive and aware of her situation, which is, when you review that even for a second, that's a haunting fate to have. To be there day after day until the day you die with a son that you hate. And even if she's not aware, by the way, this is not the way she wanted to live, and she would still be in that exact same situation with the son that she hates. And then the episode ends off with Eve Carlo role-playing as Frances, and I was like, my god, this is very creepy, and obviously Eve is probably happy enough being here because she knows what he is. She said that to Sophia, and to be fair, like, she gave Sophia her fair shot, as she puts it, and Sophia failed, so, you know, from where Eve is standing, she may as well roll with the high roller. But, like, man, now that he doesn't have Frances, hearing him ask Eve to say that she's proud of him, or, you know, I did it, Ma, didn't I? Tell me I did it.
I did it, Ma. Didn't I? Tell me I did it.
Now, I just hope that this is just simply some, you know, disturbing, cathartic roleplay for Oz, and it just stays there. But with the way Eve's demeanor is in this moment, it does make me question, like, I'm sorry to bring it up, but, like, did anyone else question if it goes to the bedroom as well? And does that roleplay maintain? And then, ladies and gentlemen, we zoom out of the penthouse window and we look at this gorgeous shot of Gotham City. And finally, the bat signal lights up. So you can see what I mean with how this doesn't exactly set up the Batman 2, but it's still so freaking cool to see. And as we know from Matt Reeves, Batman is already on the case, so this quite literally must be where we pick up in the second movie, as more or less directly in this moment, because I think this is what they meant when they said that, and how this very bat signal lighting up moment will be the equivalent, if you will, of when we saw Gordon light up the bat signal in the intro for the first movie. So like, pretend like almost this is that, like the intro of the first movie, but we're going to be in a different location. I don't know though. But guys, yeah, all I can say is I hope Batman beats the living crap out of Oz, and that Sophia has saved a seat for him in Arkham, but in reality, in this iteration, I suppose Oz would probably go to Blackgate. And I don't know if he's even going to be in a vulnerable spot, to be honest, for a long time, because you don't do a story about Oz's ascension into power, for him to become the Kingpin, for him to just lose it in the Batman 2 that quickly. Do you know what I mean? And then let alone tease his political ambitions of rolling with those at City Hall. So as a result of that, I actually think he's pretty damn fortified. But I still want him to be angered by the Bat in the Batman Part 2, and severely so, for what he's done to Sophia and obviously mainly Victor. And now I'm also just wondering about Oz's role in the Batman Part 2, because, you know, I'm willing to bet we get another Rogues Gallery villain. Like, there's another case with another Rogues Gallery villain, but like Oz, you know, could just, you know, Colin Farrell's role could just be, and this new parameter in Gotham, that could just be what it is. Like, he's now the Kingpin, and he might rule for X amount of time. And sure, he might pop up, and there might be a new status quo establishing moment between Batman and Oz, but again, I don't expect for it to dissolve like that. So I do think the next movie's still going to be primarily about something else. Hopefully, Oz can be like sprinkled, peppered in there nicely, like the first movie. But I would have to assume he would have a little bit more screen time than the first film, but maybe he won't. Like, maybe it's just gonna be, hey, he's the Kingpin. And we could get a Penguin season 2, furthering that story even more, as this has been an insanely popular show for HBO. It is actually blown records in the best kind of ways. So that, honestly, there is actually a direction for that. Normally, several months ago, I wouldn't have entertained that so much, but now, if there's a story to tell, they can tell it. And he is in a new, interesting position of power. And there is obviously the political high roller scene that he can get into. And yeah, that could be interesting. But as for Part 2, the Batman Part 2, I wouldn't expect crazy big things from Oz necessarily. But one satisfying thing to see would be Batman coming down pretty damn hard on one of his operations and pissing him off. But I would love to talk more about this. Maybe I'm going to do a bonus video in where I think things can go from here in the Batman Part 2 after thinking about it even more, but this review has been way too long enough as it is already. So those are my thoughts for now. Let me know what you thought of this finale, guys. I mean, I thought it was exceptional, if you couldn't tell already. It's left a hole in me, but that's not a negative to the show. It's just, they forged a great Batman villain here, and a worthy iteration of Oz Cobblepot, who has now had his ascension of power, and to become this just absolute avatar of filth, do you know what I mean, for the criminal underbelly of Gotham. But that makes him a great Batman villain. It really does, and who knows where things are going to go from here on out. And I'm going to be gutted that we have no more Penguin to explore, but don't worry, on the channel we have a Batman discussion series. I'm going to do a whole other video doing questions going over and coming out of the finale that you guys, for those of you still watching, can leave down in the comments below. Any theories you have, anything you want to rack my brain about going into the larger world of the Batverse, let me know them. But I'm going to love you and leave you now, so just would really appreciate a like. If you've enjoyed the reviews on this channel, consider subscribing for more update videos, reviews, breakdowns, you name it. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for your support. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.